Okay, we just wait for them to join very quickly. It should be fine. So because of we will do a 30-minute session, then take a short minute break, and then do a 30-minute session again, and then a 2-minute break. Yeah. Which is good lah. Maybe we can drink water, stretch our legs a bit, huh? Intentional, not because of the Zoom. Why did we do?
Okay, we're ready.
Ready, slay. Slay. I'm just gonna try to turn off the sound.
Please turn off the sound, join, leave sound, and then we can get started.
I think it just stopped. I need to find it very fast. Yeah, we can take a selfie now. Let's take it.
The Philippine.
We can see you.
Yeah.
Oh, I need to wait for my.
From your side.
Quality is not good.
Yours.
Okay, it's been disabled. Apologies for my tech issues. I go to an online university, I still struggle with tech. All right. So it's Philippines is there, Tron is there, Mai is there. Okay, perfect. So welcome everyone. So this is our panel session. It's actually about the end user analysis. So you all previously learned about design thinking during the previous workshop. So this is more to do with the empathy phase, which I think we'll learn later in a session. But this is for you to basically empathize with people who are being affected most by food insecurity, and particularly in our context, because we're partnering with water waste, food waste, but also food security is a general topic. So I think as we all know, the theme is how can we feed the world. We're gonna move into like a food crisis soon, given that the world population is growing so fast and we don't have enough land, climate change, like it's a lot of factors, it's a very, very complex problem. So yeah, we have a civic partner, which is Alvin Chen from Waterways. So Waterways is an NGO that tackles food waste, and he'll talk more about that later. And our guest speaker for today is YB. Oh, YB is in Malay for Your Honorable Michelle Ng. She's the State Assemblywoman for Subang Jaya.
Hi.
Yeah, and thank you so much for joining us, YB, Michelle, and Alvin, for not just for the participants in KL, but also our friends from Cebu and from Ho Chi Minh who are joining in, calling in. So just a little brief introduction, I think, about Alvin. So Alvin and his wife Angela, they started Waterways with the main mission to fight food waste and also feed the poor in a sustainable fashion. And both of them were actually architects. And they were the brainchild behind like a lot of Waterways high impactful initiatives. And in fact, fun fact, Alvin was a member of Mensa, so he's literally a genius at the age of 16, and he went to complete architectural studies at University of Tasmania. And he was very involved in like affordable housing schemes. And 4 years ago, he left the corporate world and he dedicated his life fully to advocating for good environmental practice. And today, Alvin speaks at a lot of local universities in Malaysia. And today, Waterways has rescued about more than 4 million kilograms of food from going to the landfills, preventing a lot of greenhouse gas emissions. And he has fed thousands of marginalized communities and underprivileged families, which is amazing. That's just Alvin, his wife, eight full-time and 2 bosses, 10 people who rescued 4 million kilograms, which means each of them individually has rescued 400,000 kilograms. I mean, I know like it's a team effort, but imagine that's the scale, y'all. And then YB Michelle is the State Assemblywoman of Subang Jaya. She is also the chairwoman of the Select Committee on Selangor Water Resource and the Legal Bureau Secretary of the Democratic Action Party. Michelle was a practicing lawyer with a particular interest in constitutional, human rights, and public interest litigation. She was a legal associate at Gobind Singh Dio and Co. And before that, Srinavesan Yang. She completed her Bachelor's of Law from the London School of Economics and Political Science on a scholarship. She was also admitted as a barrister in law with Inner Temple, and prior to that, she studied A-levels at Health University College on a scholarship, and she went to Catholic High School and SGD Yokna, respectively. How do I know YB Michelle and Alvin? I actually interned with YB Michelle before. She accepted me after high school. Not many people will accept a high schooler. And I've worked with YB Michelle. And why did we invite her as a state assemblywoman? Like in the bio, it has nothing to do with food waste. But basically, I think it's similar in all countries during lockdown, during COVID. Some countries had it worse than others when it comes to lockdowns. Like Western countries had very loose lockdowns. In Asian countries like Malaysia, we had a very, very strict lockdown, which meant that all economic activity was paused. People lost their jobs, businesses were dying. So a lot of people were literally starving and they didn't have food or milk powder for their babies. So a lot of people started flying a white flag as a sign of surrender. So there was a white flag initiative and it was really, really bad. I think maybe I watched the video and you said maybe in a day you have 50 families who fly the flag. And then it's just people who fly the flag. There are people who are embarrassed to do it and neighbors would reach out. And I think when I was interning with YB, it was during that period, we would like lift a lot of rice, a lot of vegetables, and that wasn't even the worst part. So like YB Michelle has been very, very involved in food security and ensuring that her constituents are fed well. And in fact, I think YB is Subang Jaya the biggest ADUN in the Malaysia or biggest in Islam?
In Malaysia, yeah.
So yeah, her constituency is the largest constituency in Malaysia with about how many residents?
Residents, 250,000.
250,000, 250,000 residents. Yeah, gerrymandering, love that. But because of that, she literally has to take care of so many people. And She's very on the ground. Literally, most people have spoken to her, has the office contact, and that means that, yeah, this is kind of this panel is for us to kind of empathize with the people that both Wyvern, Michelle, and Alvin help. So, without any further ado, we'll jump to questions. So, general questions. I think I kind of introduced, so we don't have to do introductions anymore. So I'll start with Alvin. So Alvin, can you briefly describe the issue of food waste in Malaysia and its impact on social, economic, environmental, um, social, environment, economy?
Let me just quickly say hi and welcome to friends from Philippines and Vietnam. Good to have you all on board joining us today. Thank you, KV, Kavan, for the very kind introduction. So you see, food waste is a global problem, right? We cannot deny that food waste is a global problem. It's not just a problem that's being faced by Malaysians and all, but to put it in perspective is this. In Malaysia, every day, 18,000 tons of food is being wasted. Right? 18,000 tons of waste is making its way to the landfills and all. Now, from these, statistics has clearly shown that between 3,000 to 4,000 tons of these waste are actually avoidable. These are edible, good food. So to put it into a better perspective is this, a third of food produced globally are actually wasted or lost along the way. So in the context of Malaysia, for to facilitate a better understanding is this, 3,000 tons simply means, 3 to 4,000 tons simply means, every 18 days, every 18 days, the amount of food that all of us are throwing, can literally fill the Petronas Twin Towers all the way to the brim, and it's actually happening, right? Now, we all know this has a direct implication, food waste has a direct implication to the environmental effects of it. Food, when it makes its way to the landfills, when it starts to deteriorate, when it starts to decompose, it emits greenhouse gases, carbon dioxide, methane gas, and when it gets into the atmosphere, it traps heat, and hence having a direct implication on climate change and all. So we can see the direct effects, the direct linkage between food waste, environment, and climate change as a whole. Right? That's on one hand. And we must understand that food waste is one of the largest, if not the largest, contributor to the greenhouse gas. I think it's coming to be about 24% more than that. So it's an astronomical amount there, right? And Malaysia is a food haven, right? We've been always recognized. We are recognized as a food haven. We are multicultural. We have the Malay food, we have the Chinese food, we have the Indian food, and mix them all together. You intertwine all these together, you have a wide variety of fusion mix and all. So, and it's so easily accessible in Malaysia. So, tendency to overorder, tendency to overbuy is so great, especially with the whole mamak culture in Malaysia, where we have 24 hours F&B stalls throughout Malaysia and all. So at any time, you can just have access to food. So we find that this situation actually gives rise to a lot of all these unnecessary food wastages and all. Now, this is on one hand. On the other hand, in Malaysia, we are still seeing very visible signs of poverty and hunger, not just in remote areas, but in the urban context, the urban poor areas and all. Even in the area that we are fairly acquainted with, Subang, Jaya, we still do have, right, in even developed residential areas, developed cities and all, you will still see poverty, hunger happening here and there. But to put it into better and more accurate context is this: the malnutrition rate in Malaysia is among the highest in Asia, right? It's among the highest and it's alarming. So we find that kids, children, from within the B40 communities. B40 in Malaysia means they are the 40% of the lower income groups in Malaysia. We see stunted growth, we see health risks. These are resultant of malnutrition rate, something that we are also addressing along the way, along the line of our daily food rescue missions and also these just gives you an overview of the whole paraphernalia of how a large topic of food waste, if we understand the root of the problem, how we can actually address it throughout the whole supply chain, and how and why the whole water waste movement, what is it really that we are actually trying to achieve here? It's not just as simple, merely collecting food supplies, recovering lost food, and passing it on to the needy communities. Yeah, generally that's what we do to explain our missions. But as a whole, there's a lot of layers of depth of what we're trying to do, what we're trying to achieve nationwide. And also along the way, I'll share a little bit more how we are also using technology to facilitate our food rescue missions. So yeah, this just gives you a very clear scenario that this is definitely a topic. It's not a stale topic, but it's a topic that sincerely and seriously warrants serious attention and immediate attention. So then we find that recently, I think last year, 2019, right? 2019, what has actually happened in Malaysia is that when the Food Donors Act was passed, right, and it was gazetted and all, we see being on ground, we see very encouraging results of how policy making pertinent to this topic, to this area, how it actually encourages food manufacturers, hoteliers, right, food stalls, the whole chain. It actually encourages them to take the bold step forward now to actually pass on their near expiry food or their best before food items, because for them to make to actually bin it or send it to the landfill is a major cost element to them, right? So with this bill, we are seeing more and more very encouraging results. Then they are stakeholders who are actually joining the bandwagon to fight food waste in this respect. And there are so many benefits that you can associate to recovering lost food and all. You save so much on food waste management. You save so much on you are able to directly fight and address poverty, hunger. So these are the areas, right, bits and pieces as a whole that we're trying to address here at water waste. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Alvin. I think I personally really like the fact that people think that food waste is a purely systemic thing, which it is. Like the system is very big, but there's a lot of things we can do. Simple things like buying what you need and not like wasting food. It really goes a long way, because if everyone wastes like 1 kilogram of food a day, it really adds up. Like there's like billions of us on this earth, right? And I think what Alvin talked about malnutrition, because in Malaysia we have I think there's a difference between malnutrition and being undernourished. So I think Alvin has explained to me before that in Malaysia we have a lot of people who are like undernourished, but also people who are overnourished, which makes no sense. But particularly I think among poorer countries, like countries that will colonize, like a lot of these countries, we have a very starch-heavy diet because it's just cheaper to have starch. When you go to Western countries, they have things like cheese and meat because we couldn't really afford that, and that's why it's cheaper to just eat like noodles, and that means that rates of diabetes and obesity is really, really high. I think Malaysia is the highest in Asia when it comes to diabetes and obesity. And one more fun fact for all the Klang Valley participants, all our food is supplied by water waste, and that means that all our food is cooked, either like a majority of the ingredients would have been thrown out, but like the food you ate just now is perfectly fine. In fact, it tastes really good because he works with like a lot of partner restaurants who are like chefs, and the food we get are not only like environmentally sustainable, but it's also good food. So yeah, thank you so much, Alvin, for sharing. My next question will be for YB Michelle. So YB, tell us about the White Flag campaign and what your office did during the movement control on order in response to requests for food aid.
Yeah, for context for our international friends, Malaysia underwent very patchy movement control orders, and I would say that it could have been done better on various fronts. But in particular, when we went into our first movement control order in 2020, sometime about March, um, it's a result of not being experienced with movement control orders, and so the government announced it 2 weeks at a time. And that created a widespread economic problem, especially amongst exporters, because they live literally hand to mouth. And so when you tell them, I'm going to enact a movement control order for 2 weeks, they will plan their expenses for 2 weeks. But at the end of 2 weeks, it wasn't the end of the movement control order. It went on for months. And so we saw a lot of people going hungry. Now, going hungry is one thing, but then you would have knock-on impact, economic problems, social security problems as well. If you do not tackle people who are hungry, they'll start stealing. You will have riots, even that could potentially continue. So we talked to our police about it. Strictly speaking, we were not allowed to move as well, even though we were elected representatives. But with the good ties that we had, they allowed us. And the argument was, look, if we don't feed people, it's going to have knock-on impact, and you're going to have a lot more in your hands. Now, the white flag campaign didn't come about in 2020, it came about much later, about 2021. So by this time, people were absolutely desperate, and a lot of the government initiatives that were announced. Oh, you can't hear me?
It's a bit muffled, right? Is it? Because it's a bit distant.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I was saying that the movement control orders were not organized very well in Malaysia, and so you had a lot of knock-on impact. Now, when the white flag campaign came about, it was already 1 year into COVID, and you would have thought that a lot of the problems that we face would be better. Unfortunately, that was not what happened on the ground. A lot of the subsidies that were announced didn't actually get to the people that really needed it. And I'm talking about not just B40, right? But you have, 30% of our workforce being foreign workers as well. And so they were excluded entirely from the system because foreign workers, we have to take care of our Malaysians first, right? Now, the white flag campaign came about in 2 ways. The first, online, where people say, if you're hungry, fly the white flag. And subsequently, an app came about, done by young people. It's just a very simple website app, where if you are hungry, you can just put up a virtual white flag, and whoever it is who is interested can address that white flag and say that, look, I've met that person, and you'll be taken down. In our constituency, we decided to respond through that platform as well, aside from having another stream with our community leaders. So we got people who expressed that they were hungry through our community leaders, and we would meet them there. And then we had another stream online where we had a team that checked daily in Subang, Jaya, who was flying the white flag. And we will communicate with the admins of that website to say, look, we're gonna feed them. After we feed them, we'll send you proof, please take it down. And we will also have our community leaders going around every day to look for white flags. So I'm a believer in this. When the people have organized themselves in a way for us to notice, it is our duty to respond. So many politicians, especially those who were in government at the time, saw it as a threat that I'm not doing my job. But not necessarily. So why does it have to deal with you in a very manner? And so a lot of people feedback.
Because they told me that they can't hear me, it's still a bit muffled.
You want to use your mic?
I'm trying to do that, but if I open the mic here,
You might have to turn off that.
yeah, so in that case, can we just try to talk as we just try to talk as loud as, like, a bit louder lah, like we just project. If we talk like this, can you all hear? Kat, can you hear?
Yeah,
can you all hear me clearly?
That time it was clear now.
Okay, I think we just have to talk louder because it's a bit far from the mic. Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
sorry.
Right,
Thank
yeah.
you.
Okay, so so we had a few streams of community leaders and teams that were tasked with watching out on different platforms on how to feed people. And that's basically how the white flag initiative came about. Um, I think this is a question for later, but I'm just going to answer it now. We saw actually a lot of foreigners, that needed food. And you can imagine it's because we as governments created this huge gap, right? By not having policies to address this group of people. They are stuck in Malaysia because they can't fly out. And it's a compounded problem because they're stuck here and they're hungry, right? So the thought then was, look, they are not paying taxes to us. And so therefore we don't feed them. That doesn't make sense to me. Because like I said, you will have knock-on impact. And so a lot of state assemblymen, my colleagues, they took the principle that if you are not local, right, you're not Malaysian, then the food doesn't go to you. I didn't take that approach, right? The mandate that was given to me by a lot of our donors and even the money that I've used from my allocation, I made sure that everyone, regardless of where you come from, you have to be fed. It's a basic necessity. And we saw that in a sense that locally, crime rate didn't go up in Subang Jaya, right? If they went hungry, you would have incidents like in other constituencies where they'll start stealing fish, vegetables, food in order to just survive. Right? You see the news by Dato' Maidin, right? He owns a chain of supermarkets all across Malaysia. He was saying that people were coming into his stalls and they were stealing food. And what can he do in that situation when people are hungry, right? He just forgave them because they're doing it out of necessity and not because they wanted to. So yeah, that's a little bit about how the white flag campaign came about.
Right. Thank you so much, YB. We're actually about 4 minutes into the end of this Zoom call. So basically, we'll have 3 Zoom calls, and we'll just have 30-minute sessions, and we'll just leave and then briefly come back in a minute because of logistic and tech constraints. But I think the next question I'll ask maybe YB Michelle is just a very brief question. How many people did you serve throughout COVID, through the MCO, CMCO, RMCO, CM, EMCO, whatever MCO there is? How many people did you think you served through food aid?
5,000.
5,000 people.
Actually, it's not very much to be honest with you, but 5,000. Yeah.
But is this 5,000 like a constant help, or is it some of them are like one-off aid, or is it like?
As and when they need.
Mm. And I also just share that actually YB Michelle and Alvin work very closely together because Alvin is kind of based in Subang Jaya, so like they kind of synergize a lot. So sometimes when Alvin has a lot of excess food that is like vegetables that are good, sometimes we would distribute it from our from YB Michelle's office, and that's like in Subang Jaya because there's a very strong sense of community. I don't live in Subang Jaya. I work here. I intern here for YB Michelle, but I really feel there's a very strong sense of community. Like people care about each other and like they're community leaders, and that's definitely something that has been fostered by not many areas are like that. I think just a simple thing like food security, like having a sense of community is really important because you need people to look out for you. And sometimes if you are like literally it was quite funny. So some people are drying clothes, right? And they have a white towel, and then the neighbors come and bring them food, and they're like, no, I'm not applying the white flag. I'm just drying my clothes. Right? So it's quite heartwarming, but also funny lah. So yeah, that is that, and then I guess we'll just take a very brief 1-minute break. We'll end this Zoom call and join back in about 1 minute. So everyone, I will end the Zoom call and just immediately join back the Zoom call if that's okay. All right. Thank you so much, y'all.